Okay, we are here at Picnic 2011 in Amsterdam. We are the data cooks, and we are here to make data visualizations popular. We want that everyone can make their own data visualizations like they make food nowadays. So interesting guests will join and cook something out of the data we have. Okay, so we are here in Picnic together with Peter Corbett, the man behind many things related to open data. So tell us a bit what you have been doing lately.
Sure. So I guess I've been fortunate enough to continue to go around the world and hear stories about the open data initiatives that various countries and cities have, see a lot of civic applications that are being developed. If you've paid attention to any of this space whatsoever, you've probably seen the World Bank doing their Apps for Development Challenge, which has been an incredible success. I think that over 120 applications built by people all over the world, and many of them were built in Africa, which is really promising. You saw Amsterdam launch Apps for Amsterdam, so I dropped in for that launch, and that just wrapped up their first iteration. I believe this morning here at Picnic, they're launching Apps for North Holland, which should be interesting too. So we can see that the open data bug has certainly bit the Netherlands hard.
Yeah, and you're the person who has seen many different cities, and how would you compare cities? Are the open data scenes different, or is there some different open data uses?
Sure, yeah, I think the cities all have it's a life cycle you go through. Here in Amsterdam, it's still very early, right? So they were, over the past year, just talking with their government to find what kind of data could be published openly. They just had their first apps contest. Obviously, Helsinki has been at it since, maybe 2008 was when I came to Helsinki originally, and Apps for Finland launched, and that was a big success. In Washington, D.C., where I'm from, I think it's stalled a little bit. Our data catalog is still probably the biggest and most robust in the world, but the city government has really big budget issues, and so I think they're focused on other things right now. Doesn't mean that other awesome open data things won't happen in Washington, D.C.
So we have a moment now to sketch out some new use for open data. We have data specialists from Helsinki, and so we can have a short brainstorming session with you about something exciting that hasn't been done yet with
Sure.
data and cities.
Sure.
So do you have anything in mind that would be interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably seen over 500 to 1,000 civic apps over time all over the world now, so I've seen a lot of different takes on things. The most exciting ones are typically built with real-time data. And so let's assume that Helsinki or Amsterdam had the world's best real-time data feeds. And what I'd love to see, you could start with a base map, right? Whether it's a Google Maps or OpenStreetMap or what have you. And what I'd love to see is transit, right? So I know that in Helsinki, your streetcars have GPSs in them, and that feed is somewhat open. So seeing those moving on the map, easy enough, right? Not that complex. I'm sure someone's done that. But what's being done now, right? So what's even more interesting would be, how do we correlate the social data as people are checking in on Foursquare or tweeting or whatever that kind of information is that they're generating, and map it back to their place in real time? Because then you could say, oh look, there's 100 designers on the train, right? Or there are 100 architects, or the average age of a train rider between noon and 1 p.m. is 22 years old. And you'd have that information in real time. You could build a little dashboard where you'd see those numbers ticking and moving. I think that's an interesting thing to build.
Let's sketch it out a bit.
Okay. You know I'm the worst drawer in the world. Are you guys drawing, or am I?
He is.
We're going to rely on our data chefs over here.
Yeah, we have our data chefs and our designer here. He'll
Good.
show it what it could possibly look like.
All right.
Location data is, as you say, it's more and more commonplace every day, and real time. I think we're going to get it in the very near future in a lot of places, not only Helsinki, but all around the world, with Facebook, Twitter, and everything supporting location data, and definitely there will be some applications for this, and I think the idea is very, very nice.
He just drew Texas, by the way. I'm not really sure why. Or that's Helsinki?
Helsinki looks a bit like Texas, I guess. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's of course interesting to see, a snapshot data. But what could make it even more interesting is that if we could sort of collect the data over time, and one way would be that. Let's say if you want to see where the architects are, then let's say an architect traveling on a tram line would leave a faint trace, and when another architect comes on, it would become stronger, and so on. So you could see if certain patterns, do certain kind of patterns emerge from this bar to the School of Architecture or something. Could you see that kind of traveling patterns? And that might be an interesting thing to try to show.
So Peter, what would you actually use this for? In what moment would this be useful, or what decision?
I think you could see it as, and actually one of the original ideas was around a lot of the cycling that happens in Helsinki. So you could see these tribes of people, groups of people that have a specific affiliation traveling in mass and understanding, is there a pattern there that's useful? Who are the users of our city services? I think you'd get a deeper understanding of that. The way that cities typically get that kind of understanding is through like a survey or a big research project, and it's this costly thing. So why don't we just use the data that's already being published by the citizens and their social profiles, mapped back against the real-time GPS information that's on the trains, and you could have your real-time, essentially, surveying of who is using our stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Comparing different public transport systems in different cities, have you seen anything really exciting where people would have profiles, or where they would actually give more information about themselves? Usually it's just route finders or things like that.
The closest thing, so the answer is no, I haven't really seen anything that interesting. The closest thing would probably be with what San Francisco has been doing with Foursquare. And so they got their own BART badge. So BART is the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority, right? And so when you check in and you're at a station, you get that badge. Now, who cares about a badge? But there's a psychological thing that happens when you're like, oh, I'm a good citizen, I'm not driving my car and polluting, instead I'm taking mass transit. And so people are like, oh, I want to check in, I want to get that thing. And so that is that integration of a city's transportation system with a social network, right? And I think we're going to see a lot more of that over time. Do I, as a citizen, earn specific things if I use public transport more than I do if I use my car? Do I eventually get tax breaks if I do that kind of thing? Because now if I'm not driving, I'm not creating as many potholes, right? Which means I'm not creating more cost.
These ideas are really interesting, and so I guess in the time frame that we have, we must narrow it down a bit, but now we have something to start from, and from a visualization point of view, it seems interesting thing to use the map base and then plot the data on it, who's moving where. It's a couple of things, of course, I'm thinking about. Are we creating a Big Brother kind of thing here, and is the data somehow biased if we use just sort of self-reported data? But then again, I guess that is something we can address with not trying to claim that this shows something that it doesn't. We just have to find out what we can actually show and how it can be best done.
Yeah. So let's go inside next, and we'll cook something out of this, and then look at what has been done.
Perfect.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Manipulate it, manipulate it, manipulate it, manipulate it, manipulate it, manipulate it, manipulate it the way we want it. Manipulate it.
Okay, considering Finland is not really a big country population-wise, only 5 million people or so, the metropolitan region is comparatively large. In that sense, it has like over 1 million people living over the area of these cities. So here you can see the population figures reflected on the map, and each of these little counters is 10,000 people. I think that the Amsterdam metropolitan region is something a little over 1 million people also, but if you overlaid the map over here, of course it would be a lot smaller because it's much denser. So if we did something like this for Amsterdam, I think we'd have to start with some different solutions because they obviously use very different modes of public transport.
So basically, what we envisioned here is something like a Foursquare or so, but with direction. So you can actually, and it would be integrated with something since Helsinki, the Helsinki traffic region, they have the real-time tracking of the buses.
Do you think that Finns, if you had a check-in service for transit, if let's say every time you used the train or every time you took your bike ride, that if someone checked in at the beginning and the end of that trip, if there was an incentive for them, would they do that? So maybe they got a free train ticket the next time if they did it 10 days in a row or otherwise?
I think they might go into that.
Yeah.
Do you actually know if in any city in the world people log in to public transport vehicles?
Well, in Washington, D.C., we have smart trip cards. And that means that every trip we start and every trip we get off of, the system at least knows we're in it or out of it.
Yeah.
Now, that's not public information. The Washington Transportation Authority has made all the schedules and the train locations open through API now, which is that's progress. It took years to get that done. They originally weren't going to do it, so that's great. But aside from, checking in and out of a station using a trip card, I don't know if there's social software that people are using. I don't think it's really a public display of what I'm using right now that has been endorsed by any government. It's user-driven, so people checking in on Foursquare or tweeting or what have you.
The big question is that would people really want to log in to individual vehicle, or would they let the transport authority to give out that information? I don't know if the visualization, is this the right way to prototype this?
Well, first of all, I think it is all about incentives. So if the users of the transit system knew that if they perform this action, displaying their check-in or out of the transit system, would they get something? Would that 10th time they do it, they got a free trip? I think they would. I think a lot of people would say, all I have to do is tweet or use Foursquare or what have you whenever I'm getting on or off. I think they would do it. The question of whether or not this prototype, laid out as a map with our colored routes and whatnot, with tweets that pop up or otherwise, is the right format for this kind of information display, that's a good question. What may be more interesting to do is to look at a mobile interface. This is clearly built to be a web interface, and I think that as you're using transit, you're going to be walking around, so it should be on at least a mobile-sized screen. Well, the simplest incentive is that there's a prize somewhere on the transit system today in Helsinki, and one of you lucky social media users is going to get it if you only perform this action. And that prize could be free lunch, could be €1,000, it could be whatever it might be. And so you introduce that element of winning and prizing to it, you have a whole nother level of engagement that's possible.
Yeah. For me, looking at this, I'm most convinced about this part. But yeah, I think it was interesting anyways.
Yeah, and then I would love to see that correlation of the actual money spent on each of the modes of transportation to see if, if people aren't using the tram as much, but the tram gets half the budget, why? I understand the tram is beautiful and fun, but maybe that should be allocated towards the buses because so many people are using the buses.
Yeah. But this was it.
Yep.
It was an interesting process, and thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
All right. And that's a wrap.